Yeah, that's my song. It's me, Brad Stine, God's comic. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. Tonight's guest is the amazing return. We're getting to a place in our podcast, son, where we are getting return guests of people who love certain people and said, bring them back. That's happening now. Jason Jones, the amazing a Renaissance man, human rights activist who's saved kids out of sexual trafficking and involved in filmmaking. And he's got a brand new book, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset. That thing has to be not only unreset, but destroyed into oblivion. And we're going to talk to Jason Jones, a returning guest tonight. But for right now, I am Brad Stine, or as you like to call me, God's comic. And this, on the other side of the screen, the guy you never get to see and you never will, is my son, Wyatt Stine. Wyatt, how are you? And why did you show up again after all these years?
I need the money.
Yeah, well, the money.
What little of it there is.
Wyatt was saying to me, I can't believe it's almost 7 because he said it's so bright out. You know why it's bright out, Wyatt?
The sun?
Yeah, but guess why?
It's bright.
Because it's springtime.
That would explain why I can't stop coughing.
Let me ask you, yes, I know. You've got, my son has, if you guys pray, and if specifically you have the gift of praying for allergies to be destroyed, pray for my son. He's coughing all the time. I said it was bright out because you were complaining that it seemed too bright and it didn't make sense to you. I said it's because it's springtime. So, of course, we moved the clocks ahead, that of course, but it just as the time goes and the sun gets out there longer, as we head towards summer, it's brighter, longer. So yeah, okay, but here's the point. Spring is all I was getting at. Forget the sun, that was your reference point, could care less. Spring means we start a rebirth, a regrowth. It's where, resurrection, Easter came, it's spring at the same time for that reason. Hey, new birth, death, and now life. This Saturday, I'm going to be in Virginia Beach, Virginia, at the FFX Theater, performing Laugh While It's Legal, my brand new 1 hour's worth of brand new, you guys have never seen it comedy unless you came to see my show earlier, the area of Virginia Beach. If you know people in Virginia, send them notes, get them out. We're looking for 250 people that will sell it out, and we will have ourselves an amazing show, and you guys will be able to see it. Who knows when we're going to broadcast it? You're going to be able to see it on Goodview Television for sure, and who else knows where else it's going to be. So I'm excited about that, Wyatt. You coming, son?
Oh, right, that.
Yeah.
I was going to,
You
but
got lows. You got lows. Yeah, okay. We had someone earlier talk about how much Aaron Oaks, he loved the new material that I've been putting out every day since I think around March 29th. You know what they're called, son?
I do not know.
They're called Your Daily Brad. Now,
oh, yes.
Now,
right.
Here's something you wouldn't know about, son, I'm guessing, because you're only 27 years old, which means you're bordering on dumb. But here's the deal. When I was growing up, and I don't know when it started, I'm going to say maybe even the 50s, there was this little devotional that you could subscribe to, and they'd send it to you in the mail every month, and it was a daily devotional. And so it would have May 1, 2, 3, and it would just have a little scripture verse, and it would have some beautiful little inspirational idea, and maybe a scripture verse afterwards. And it was called Your Daily Bread. Your Daily Bread, because Jesus said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth for the Father, and so forth. But daily bread was this idea of getting manna, some feeding of your soul, of your spirit, through the daily bread. So I had this idea of calling it Your Daily Brad because it sounds like daily bread, but it's Brad. And Brad, as you know, in Aramaic means spring. I really am excited about Jason Jones here tonight because he is going to talk about his new book, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset. If you don't know what the Great Reset is, you have to. If you are a Christian, if you are conservative, if you care about freedom, if you care about liberty, if you care about autonomy, it's right at our doorstep and it's already making inroads. But we have people that are paying attention, focusing on it, and trying to end it. And you can be one of them once you purchase the book, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset. Who is it? Jason Jones, a favorite here on Brad Stine Has Issues. And now he's back. I give you Jason Jones. How do you do, my friend?
Good to see you, Brad Stine.
Oh, it's good to be seen. I'm so grateful that you showed up and that you are actually on the other end of the line. Where are you located? Are you still in Hawaii?
No, I'm in German Hill. I'm in the German Hill country of Texas.
Ah.
The recent eclipse passed right over my home.
Yet,
Uh,
were any red heifers sacrificed at that time?
I, in fact, sacrificed a red heifer, and I'm
Nice.
why the dragon spit the sun back out and why we're all alive today.
Well
I'm glad you asked. A lot of people don't give me credit for that.
Well, I knew somebody was doing it. I wasn't sure it was you. So
It
what
was
a
me.
coup to have you on my podcast right
Yes,
after the heifer
it's
sacrifice.
I am the
Uh,
guy, the Texas guy with the red heifer. That's me.
yes. Well, listen, Jason, again, thanks again for coming on. You're such a interesting guy, such a um, man of many talents, gifts, callings. And the good thing about you is you don't think about it. You go out and do it. Not everybody does that. Not everybody has that personality. A lot of people can wring their hands. A lot of people really good at wringing their hands and not good at doing something about it. Problem solvers, sort of hitching themselves up by their bootstraps and getting to work. And that's what you do. And when I saw this book that you have coming out, you need to send me one. I don't do PDFs. I'm old school. I got to smell it and be able to underline it and look at it. I'm an autodidact. There it is.
Me too.
So,
This is my galley copy for me
yeah.
and my
Well, I
reference.
don't want your galley copy. I want the actual printed book so I can highlight it. And that's how I think. That's how I reason. That's how I educate myself as an autodidact. I didn't know there was a word for that. I didn't know there was a term for that. But that's a self-learned man. That's how my brain works. It's how I accomplish, hopefully, what I'm doing, which is to bring into my mindset and then to contemplate it spiritually and logically ideas and see how they comport to reality, and if necessary, to do something to put them into the culture at large and see if we can do some tweaking to what has gone terribly, terribly wrong in the West, which of course affects the whole wide world. So we're going to talk about your book and the ramifications therein, the great campaign against the Great Reset. For those who may not be familiar with the Great Reset, which is a deeply disturbing, because Lord knows if you don't even know what this is or didn't know it existed, then you will be easily succumb to it. So I'm going to let you establish that foundation so people know what we're dealing with. What in the world is the Great Reset?
Well, Brad Stine, thank you for that question. That is the $1 million question. There have been a lot of great books on the Great Reset. They deal with aspects of it. You could think of the Great Reset as an elephant, and so there's the tusk, there's the leg, there's the tail. I do think that my book is probably the first that takes a more comprehensive look at the Great Reset through the lens of the gospel of Jesus Christ and actually through the lens of anthropology. But the Great Reset, when this expression first entered the lexicon a little over a decade ago, and then it was popularized by Klaus Schwab, who of the World Economic Forum, who was centrally cast. He was perfectly cast for the role of a globalist Bond villain. He is the child of a Nazi. He has the wonderful German accent. And you want an accent like that when you say bizarre things like you're going to own nothing and like it, and you're going to be eating cricket meat and be very happy. You want to say that. When I say it, it doesn't sound that menacing, but when somebody says with a German accent, you'll own nothing and like it, that puts your hair on end. And so he was cast perfectly for the role of a Bond villain. And so it entered the lexicon. And so what is the Great Reset? People think of this, they're going to take our property, they're going to lock us in smart cities, they're going to control our travel, that we're going to have social credit scores. And there is all of this. It is a collision of illiberal ideologies that wipe away the last vestiges of Western civilization that weren't shattered and broken in the past century of ideological enthusiasms that included fascism, Nazism, totalitarian socialism, communism, neoliberalism, the woke ideologies. Think of this as a collision. But at its heart, what the Great Reset hopes to do, and I think it's pretty explicit, is wipe away the last vestiges of respect for the human person that the Christian understanding, Christian anthropology demands a certain respect for human beings. And those who are hyper concerned with progress, and I'm going to put progress in quotes, the technological progress is a better way of looking at it, whether it was the Nazis or the communists or now the advocates of the Great Reset, see the Christian understanding of the human person and our responsibility to each other as a great hindrance towards their transhumanist utopian obsession with quote unquote progress. And so my book, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset, looks at the 5 ideological tactics that the globalists are using to divide, conquer, and control the human family, and sort of those 5 pillars, those 5 foundational principles that grew out of a Christian respect for the human person. And that really we don't have to understand, we don't have to sneak into Bohemian Grove like Alex Jones did. We don't have to understand every aspect of those who are conspiring for a one world government, a one world socialist, godless, quote unquote, utopia. All we need to know are those principles that we can advocate for a humane, just society that will break any ideological enthusiasm's attempt to control us. So I have the 5 principles as part 2 of a humane culture, and the 5 ideological tactics of the globalists to control us.
Okay. So that's obviously incredibly crucial, because there's one thing to talk about something, but there's another thing to give you action steps, proactive ways to try to combat it, because it's a war. We're in a war,
Sure.
and it's different than maybe anything that's ever been seen before. Obviously, only in the last, whatever it's been, 20 or 30 years, has there been the technological advances for social media, for the control of thoughts and ideas that people have access to. You know, when we used to just use newspapers that ended up in your driveway, it was a lot more difficult, maybe, to go in and alter the stories that you were going to see, or perhaps it was more difficult to go to a newscaster and try to provide a script for him to read. I mean, there was a time when liberals were liberal. They allowed other points of view to be discussed, and perhaps they disagreed with it, but they allowed it to have a place at the table, and then people could evaluate. It seems like there were more political figures that cared about the Constitution and free speech and would call and check and balance when those things were being altered. Well, that's changed.
There's no more liberals.
Yeah.
No, there are no more left liberals.
Yeah.
If there are left liberals, they're just labeled as right-wing extremists. Like it's interesting. Your profession are the heroes of the age.
Yeah.
Really, it's your profession. So a lot of the left liberals that are now called alt-right fanatics, like Joe Rogan and Dave Chappelle. I mean, can you imagine? I would say they're left liberals.
Yeah.
They're not progressives. They're not for trampling human rights for some sort of technological utopian fantasy, transhumanist fantasy. They're left liberals, but they're labeled as right-wing extremists because they are reacting. They are reactionary. A lot of the leaders that are reacting, like Dr. Malone, I think would have thought of himself as a left liberal. A lot of the reactionaries to the globalists, a lot of the leading reactionaries were left liberals. But now they're poor folks, they're comparing them to us. How horrible it must be for them, because like, oh, you're a right-wing extremist like Jason Jones, you're a Christian like Brad Stine. They're like, no, I'm who I always was.
Yeah. Well, one person that's been in the same boat of attacked that way, who I believe is more classical liberal, is Alan Dershowitz, who has stood for this idea of true liberalism, supposedly, where all ideas are given access to the table, and then again people get to choose. And of course, he kind of put his money where his mouth is. He defended different people that were considered pariahs, from O.J. Simpson to I just blanked on the guy's name, the rich guy that killed his wife, or I don't know, it was some movie of the week. But anyways, but the point was freedom. and free speech that everybody says they believe in, usually, maybe not, maybe progressives have finally reached a place where they don't longer have to pretend that they care about free speech. But normally, when you wanted to pretend you believed in free speech, everybody would say that because it was a virtue. It was a literal virtue that you were a good person. But as I've always said, the only way you can actually believe in free speech, literally, by the fruit of your behavior, is if you allow speech that you hate to exist and to be able to be brought forth into culture. And that isn't what's happening. Speech from the right is being censored, destroyed, and even imprisoned. And so here we sit.
I was arrested for hosting a peaceful protest against COVID lockdown policy. I was handcuffed and thrown into a police car and was driven to the basement of a police station where they had me handcuffed in Honolulu in the summer in the back of in the late spring in the back of a police car for 3 hours in a parking garage. Then I was booked and never charged with a crime, but was held, for peacefully demonstrating against COVID policy. And now the World Health Organization, this May, the decision will be on the President of the United States' desk, Joe Biden, whether or not to hand all of our sovereignty over to an unelected bureaucracy on the other side of the world, because the WHO now wants to lock down the world at any whim that it wants. Without thoughtfulness to the constitutions of other countries or states. So governors and mayors and chiefs of police and your sheriff, your chief of police, your mayor will now just be an administrator in a globalist state. That if unelected bureaucrats want to lock you up for a climate emergency or a health emergency, they will. This is serious business. And Brad, the reason I wrote this book is you said this is a war. It's a war. People are dying. COVID policy killed, was the greatest famine in the world since World War II. David Beasley, a Trump ally who was head of the World Food Program, actually won the Nobel Prize. No one paid attention to this because it broke the narrative. He won the Nobel Prize for doing a great job at the World Food Program for mitigating food insecurity. But the reality was it was still the worst couple of years since World War II for famine. And so people are dying. So while you and I had Zoom fatigue, people were starving to death across Africa, Asia, Central and South America, because when you slow down food production, processing, and distribution, people on the edge of hunger fall into hunger. Those in hunger on the edge of starvation fall into starvation. Those who are in starvation fall into the grave. So I wrote this book because I run an organization for over 20 years that deals with matters of life and death, serving communities facing genocide, democide, and war around the world. And it dawned on me as I was seeing all of this rhetoric on the Great Reset that I had been living in the Great Reset for the past almost 3 decades, that the Great Reset seeks to liquidate and homogenize societies, seeks to reduce the world population. The same advocates, the Klaus Schwab and his cronies, and Soros and Gates and his cronies, the same people that were shoving COVID policy down our throat and an experimental medical technology that the founder of that technology, Dr. Malone, said, don't do it after he did it himself, should give you pause. But these are the same people that scuttled a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia 6 weeks into that war. These are the same people that are obsessed with reducing the population of Africa and Asia. These are the people. So the same people that say we have an overpopulation problem are the same ones trying to control the farmers in Europe that are fomenting war in the breadbasket of Europe and Ukraine. These are the same ones, Bill Gates, buying up all of our farmland. But, here's the good news. There is actually a great campaign against the Great Reset. It's happening. It's this show, Brad, your show. It's the truckers in Canada. It's the farmers in Europe. It's the Catholic bishops in Africa. It's the freedom activists in Hong Kong. It's all of those who resisted COVID policy, COVID tyranny. So there has been a great campaign. People just have felt alone. And so I wrote this book to say, no, no, you are part of a great campaign, a great adventure, and we will defeat the Great Reset. We
So,
will. We're
well, no, and God bless you for writing the book. And like I said, everybody that's watching this should be getting it and basically arming themselves with information, but also potentially ways that they can participate in fighting back. So let's as we move forward into some of the details that your book talks about and some of the tactics that you subscribe to or perhaps created, I don't know where if this is stuff out of whole cloth or if this is sort of a culmination of things you've learned over the years and other people's writings and so forth. But let's start with one thing that I think is pretty important. You talked about the death of the West, and the West, if you were to distill it down to its essence, basically is Judeo-Christian. It's the idea of the spiritual realm that is real, that describe the reality of what life actually is, how it actually works, why we are here, how we got here, what God expects of us, what he wants us to act like, how to treat each other, and what it might look like if we could return to Eden. Now, none of that's going to happen because we're sinners, but we're supposed to shoot for it with the hope that one day God will do, he'll just kind of pull the trigger and put everything back into the actual reset that he wanted from all along. But that being said, I brought that up for a reason because some people watching this, not everybody that watches my show, believe it or not, are Christians, and we're going to fix that because I want them to I want them to go to heaven and not be great patriots and fight for freedom and then go to hell because that would suck. That's unfair. You should be joining us.
We don't want any patriots in hell. If
No,
you're a
God.
liberal troll, we want you in heaven too.
We do, and
We
that's the
do.
great. And by the way, it's part of the great dichotomy that I don't know if dichotomy is right. The great oddness of Christianity when it says love your enemy and pray for those that despitefully use you. No other belief system says do that because it's counterintuitive to reality. It's like why would I be good to somebody that hates me and wants to destroy me? But God would say because they're made in my image, just like you, and I want them to repent and join us, just like you did, and you didn't deserve it either. This is the beautiful thing about Christianity. There's nothing like it. It's the only philosophy and religion that literally gives us an answer to how to get along with each other and be kind to each other. Monotheism, the idea that there is only one God, did so many things amazingly in the way it re-established what it meant to be human. But the big thing it said, for one, is if we all have the same God, we're equal. We come from the same
Brad,
God.
how great is that? Like
Yeah.
I am. My friends say this because I'm Catholic. I talk this way, but I when I was an atheist, I wouldn't have talked this way. So maybe it's true. And I was an atheist in my late 20s. Um, but I mean, I am about the nastiest human being I've ever met. My nature, just awful. When I was an atheist, I was awful and loved myself for it. Like my vices, I thought were virtues. I really, and then I just had this horrible epiphany that everything I take pride in myself for is just nasty. Um, but the idea, I'm so grateful for the faith, my Christian faith. I'm so thankful for the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm so thankful that grace is real. You know, when I first converted, I'd read something that C.S. Lewis said that men without chests, there are men who can't blush. I was that guy. I mean, fortunately, I'm Irish, so I'm perpetually red. So you may think I'm always blushing. But the reality is, I had no sense of shame, none. And I thought, when I became a believer, I thought, am I ever going to have shame? Because I was still struggling with sin. You know, obviously, I'm still struggling with sin, but there I had very big habits and temptations I was wrestling with. And I really felt that I could never blush. But to your one point, the great grace of our faith, by the way, it's true. Like the one obvious truth that our faith teaches us, and if you believe that we came from Lucy in Egypt or Adam and Eve, or Lucy, was she in Ethiopia? Lucy in Ethiopia or Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, you still have to agree with one truth that Christianity drives home. We are a family. This is a human family.
Yeah.
And the people we fight with, we're most closely related to. So
Yeah.
Palestinians and Jews, you're kissing cousins. The
Yeah.
Irish and the English, you're kissing cousins. The Ukrainians and the Russians, you're kissing cousins. Like literally, it's insane. So the grace of our faith gives us is, you know, we love our enemy because at the end of the day, that's not the truth. They're not our enemy. They're our brothers and sisters. Now, that's not easy.
No.
Obviously, I say that I'm the most holy man you'll ever meet, Brad Stine. I can forgive anybody anything, except the only thing I can't figure, I can forgive Stalin for the Holodomor and the Pol Pot for the, Cambodia, and all. I can forgive people, all these. The only thing I have trouble forgiving is anybody who wrongs me in the slightest way. That's it. If I can just achieve forgiveness for people who wrong me personally, I'll be perfect because I can forgive everything else. But so it's not easy to live out the truth.
Yeah.
But how liberating it is to know our God doesn't demand that we seek blood vendettas. God does not demand of us to hold grudges for generations. That's not in the Bible. God doesn't command that. God commands us to love our enemies.
Yeah.
That's not easy, but it liberates us from hell on earth.
It does. And it also kind of reminds us you're not any better than them. And that's hard to do. It's like, what do you mean? I'm seeking God. I'm praying. I'm trying to be righteous. This guy is corrupt and has deceived us. This is what I see in DC. The corruption has become basically the status quo. I don't trust any of these guys. Jason, none of them. And maybe there's a trustworthy guy or gal out there, but it has become such a cesspool that if there's some good piece of meat in this pot of sewage, I don't know where it is, and I'm afraid to eat it.
I don't want to eat it because it's in that pot.
Yeah, it's tainted. And so it frightens me in that regard because, we gave you our vote, which meant that we trusted you with something sacred to us, our point of view. And you said, I'll go represent that in Congress for you.
Here's the sad thing, though, Brad. They represent us. They reflect us. They reflect our desires, our passions, our virtues, and our vices.
Yeah.
Like, I teach my children, be the type of person you want to marry deserves. I tell my sons, be the type of man, the type of woman you want to marry deserves, because at the end of the day, you're going to get what you deserve. Yeah. And we receive the political leaders because we can't control our appetites. We want to be lied to when and we want when it coincides with our perceived self-interest. It's quite startling. So no, they're really just a reflection of us, as are our pastors, our priests, our religious leaders. They're a reflection of us. They come from us. They're us.
Well, okay. Well, let's sort of springboard then off of that statement. They're us, because the human race comes from the same genealogy, and we come from the same father and so forth. But the reason I bring this up for those watching that maybe are not believers is because it's important that you understand that what is our foundation. Our presupposition as to how we see the world matters, because it's going to reflect on how we vote, how we act, how we behave, what is expected of us based on how we see the world. And because Christians believe the world has a teleology that matters and it's sacred, then we are bound to it. If you are a materialist, if you are, someone who believes in a closed system, that there is nothing outside the material world, there is nothing transcendent, that we are here by accident, that we are determined, then you really are obligated to nothing but just surviving until you're done. And what I find fascinating, Jason, I'm sure you're aware of this, is what is happening to some of the new atheists that did so much that they could to destroy.
Coming to the Lord, right? Like,
yes, and these guys said, hey, and a lot of it came after 9/11. They said, see, religion is poison, it's evil. Christopher Hitchens said that. Of course, Dawkins said that. Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and folks, they were the four horsemen. But then, other people as well that are atheists, they said, religion is evil. If we get rid of it and go back to logic and reason, then the world will be a better place. Well, now, recently, maybe within a week of this taping, Richard Dawkins came out and said, I'm a cultural Christian. These guys are realizing that what you tried to destroy and maybe have have left us with nothing but chaos and anarchy. You have destroyed even the foundation you stood on, because only because Christianity exists do you have a platform to espouse atheism and blaspheme and deny God Almighty. Whereas if your people's perspective gets power, the rest of us don't get a voice. You get
No,
to
no,
vote. Yeah, you get, maybe you're the one that
no.
said this to
Look
me,
at
but
CCP. You're not
yeah.
getting a vote. No.
Well, and maybe you were the one that said this last time we interviewed, but somebody, or maybe it was John Rich, but it's telling. You get to vote for communism once, and then it's over. You're
No,
controlled
that
from then
wasn't
on.
me. That was
So
John Rich.
so here's what I think is here's what
And
I
guess
want.
what? Our posterity, Brad Stine,
Yeah.
are going to get communism and never getting the right to vote.
Hmm.
That's what the Great Reset is. It's the newest.
Well,
It's authoritarian. So we need to fight
yeah.
for
And
our
this is what I
posterity.
don't mean to get off in the weeds, but
No, no, no. I appreciate it.
I think I'm trying to establish something before we get into these details, which is where we're going right now. But first,
Sure.
there's one thing I wanted. The reason I brought up the Christian perspective is that whether you're a Christian or not, if you're in the West, you swim in Christian waters. You see the world through Christian eyes, even if you're not a believer. You don't understand that the ending of slavery, that women's rights, civil rights, human rights, dignity of the man,
The way we use
all
the
of
word
these,
love,
yeah,
the way
all
we
of
use
these,
the word love, all of
these are
it.
not natural to our
No.
makeup. The atheist says, well, our instinct would tell us this, or our gut, or and it's not. You think of these things because you were saturated in a Christian perspective of what it means. Now, the reason I say that, and the fact that atheists are now admitting this, such, hey, maybe go ahead and keep Christianity after all, because they realize this thing is going south fast. But here's where I'm trying to finally end on and need your commentary. Okay, so the West is Judeo-Christian, intrinsic value of human beings, free agency, ability to think and reason, the ability to have property, the ability to own your own things. It's all in the Ten Commandments. The ability to dignify the fellow man, not to lie about him, not to covet the things that they have. All of this is the antithesis of progressivism, which is lionizes the dark side of the Ten Commandments and literally does the opposite and then tells us it's virtuous. So here's what I need to know from you as the expert with this Great Campaign Against the Great Reset book. Who are the entities, the men, the women, whoever they are, who have established themselves as the new presuppositional worldview that we all have to bow to? Who are these guys, and what is the foundation of their worldview, so we understand who we are and what we are fighting?
So that is a great question. And I've thought about this and I've researched it a lot. And we could talk about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the Trilateral Commission. We could talk about the CFR, the globalists. But I don't think that's the answer. I think it's principalities and powers. When you look at the transgender ideology, I have friends who are on the left who have been LGBT activists who are like, where did this come from? Like, we didn't sign up for this. We're so confused, right? You couldn't even think of it. Mutilating boys, pumping young girls filled with dangerous drugs, letting a 6'4" man get in the swimming pool with a bunch of 5'7" girls, well, he still has his apparatus and he walks around the locker room with Riley Gaines and you're like, nobody thought of this. This is just, you can't think of this, right? So I think it's principalities and powers. Now I want to get to how these ideologies, these enthusiasms, or these tactics at the heart manifest themselves. And the core one that I have, which I think makes my book really unique, and it's not original to me. In fact, my book is so indebted to two writers, I feel even guilty, like it's almost plagiarism. I'm grateful that one of the writers wrote the epilogue, Gil Bailey. So Rene Girard and Gil Bailey, two wonderful Christian men. Gil Bailey is is a powerful writer, and he was a student and writing friend and partner of Rene Girard. And so this really has been, my thinking has really been formed by Rene Girard and Gil Bailey, but they really helped. And Rene Girard coined the term in the 90s, victimism. And what is victimism? It's not in the dictionary. It's not popularly known. My goal of this book is to make sure that everyone in America knows what the word victimism means in 12 months. What is victimism? It is feigning concern for the vulnerable to acquire wealth and power and prestige while completely abandoning the vulnerable to death and suffering and misery. What is victimism? It's the inverse of Christian charity. It's the inverse of solidarity, Christian solidarity. So victimism is feigning concern, using a quote unquote victim for wealth, power, prestige. Who could that be? A 5-year-old boy with gender dysphoria, in Ohio. Oh, well, let's help him get mutilated and pump him full of drugs so that I'm celebrated. That's victimism, right? Solidarity is to stand with that child, knowing that you're going to face social censure, could lose your job, Twitter mobs, but you don't care because you care so much about that child, right? So solidarity versus victimism. So in many ways, the great campaign against the Great Reset is the gospel of Jesus Christ against the ideology of Antichrist. Because victimism,
but that manifests. So I agree with you. It's all spiritual. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and wickedness and evil in the heavenly places. There's no question about that. But it manifests through formulas and philosophies for humans to grasp, so they know how to move forward. In other words, you talked about victimism.
And I want to give you a few examples. I can give you 2 really good examples of victimism. Border policy. So they say they want an open border because they care so much. They worry about the immigrants so much. Like, our city is a sanctuary city in theory, but don't please send them here. Please don't. What is victimism? They oppose border security and order at the border. And what is the fruit of that? Is it good for migrants? No. They're lured into a dangerous underground economy with economic exploitation, sexual exploitation, death in the desert, lives controlled by the cartels. The cartels actually control the border. It's not uncontrolled. It's very well much under control of the cartels. Fentanyl's pouring across our border, killing our children. So they feel like they're on this high horse. Oh, we oppose the orange man because he's a racist, because he wants border security. No. Securing the border protects vulnerable migrants from economic exploitation, women from sexual exploitation, our children from fentanyl, Mexicans from drugs coming across the border that way. From weapons coming across the border that way. Protects the wages of the newest immigrants and the working class Americans from being undercut by illegal underground economy. Another example is the whole climate cult. And I have a chapter in the 5 ideologies of evil. One is victimism, one is a climate cult. Well, let's look at the climate cult. First of all, if you're driving an electric vehicle, you need to know that you're driving a state-of-the-art, really cool car that is disastrous for the environment and worse for human beings.
Cobalt.
Because cobalt in the batteries, lithium in the batteries, the car is... The battery weighs like more than my pickup truck. The tires are 30% wider. The number one cause of particulate pollution of vehicles is not emissions from the tailpipe. It's from the tires. And EVs have huge tires and toxic batteries. They're devastating to the environment, so much so that if the internal combustion engine was invented today, just like when it was invented, it would be celebrated as an environmental miracle, because it was that combustion engine in your front yard that got the horses off the streets. And the reason why in New York and Chicago and Boston you have stairways going up at an angle like this to the front door and it's not at ground level is because what was at the ground level? Horse crap and flies, sludge. So the combustion engine is great for the environment. It always has been. The electric vehicle is just ridiculous. I call it the blood vehicle, not EV, BV. So they say they care about the environment. They say they're, King Charles in his Christmas address said we shouldn't let war and poverty and famine distract us from having compassion for the climate. whatever compassion for the climate is. Like, oh, poor climate.
Yeah.
No. So don't worry about children shoveling for cobalt with their bare hands and getting cancer by the time they're 9. Don't worry about those who are starving because of COVID policy. Don't worry about that war in Ukraine that could have had a ceasefire in April after it, just a few weeks after it started, but Boris Johnson scuttled so the military industrial complex could sell more weapons and Ukraine could still inevitably lose the war at great human cost to Ukrainians. That's all victimism, 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 victimism. So once we can call it out and say, no, and by the way, one of the reasons I wrote this book, Brad, is the youth, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're so repulsed by victimism that they think anyone who presents themselves as authentically concerned about the common good or the vulnerable is a fraud. And why would they think that? Everyone they've ever heard talk about the vulnerable is a fraud.
Yeah.
That still plays in the hands of the globalists because Christian solidarity is the way out.
Yeah.
Caring for the vulnerable is the way out. Caring about the children digging for cobalt is the way out. The Uyghur slaves in East Turkestan in concentration camps picking cotton for Nike is the way out. Standing with the vulnerable is the way out. So when Nike and the NBA do BLM victimist crap, well, their players are wearing jerseys that have Uyghur cotton picked by Uyghur slaves. Now, whenever I bring up the Uyghur, there's people who don't know what I'm talking about. Google UYGUR, slave labor, and your mind is going to be blown. For those of you who've never heard about cobalt before, dig Congo cobalt children, image search. So Christian solidarity is the way out. A lot of youth young people are really attracted to the Nietzschean right. The rise of like the Bronze Age pervert who's like a nerdy accountant who like presents himself on the internet as like some virile man, who doesn't care about the weak and the vulnerable, just like Nietzsche didn't care about the weak and the vulnerable, and he was pretty weak and fragile and vulnerable himself. The way out of the Great Reset, the way out against any ideological enthusiasm is Christian charity. And in fact, I have an open letter to young Americans in the front of the book. It's called The Adventure of Eros, Love, Piety, and Posterity. We should never forget our vocation. We were created to do only 2 things. Like if we came in a package, I don't know about your house, but we always got boxes because we don't even shop anymore. Just things come to us. But you open up a box, you order like a chair or any piece of electronics, you get the, how to work it, what not to, you get a drill, like what to do with the drill, what not to do with the drill. And it's like in 10 languages and it's like, it's a drill, but the instructions are like, it's a book. Our instructions are very simple. Love God, love your neighbor. Bang. Not easy, simple.
Well, what's more important though about that is that it's glossed over as easy terminology that sounds sweet. But if you don't define love, if you don't define what does it actually mean to love your neighbor, to love God, what is expected of you for that, then you're not going to really get the depth of what this is trying to tell us. Because the reason I bring up the Christian perspective and the foundation for the West is not because I'm trying to proselytize for Christ, though I am, because he's God. I mean, there's never been a religion that had a guy who was historically viewed and spoken of and fulfilled prophecy to prove that God is not trapped in linear time, that did miraculous things to prove he wasn't a cult leader, who died and rose again, and had people that were willing to die because they said they saw that. All of that doesn't make it true. It just means it is the most unique, fascinating, powerful book written over 1,500 years that literally was cohesive from beginning, middle to end. If there is a book that proves that God is real, that's the only one that should be worth considering because there's nothing like it. So I bring up Christianity. Of course, I want you to be a Christ follower and know your creator and be saved. I'm obligated to love my neighbor, which means tell you the truth. But equally, Jason, I want you to understand the ramifications of abandoning this worldview. That's why I ask you, who is a Klaus Schwab? Who is
They're godless. You're right. So
yeah.
you hit the
So
nail
who
on
are
the head.
these? What are they going to replace this vacuum with? And it's going to be with such a cancer into the organism. All leftism is parasitical. It never creates anything. It just sucks value out of what was created, leaves a deathly skeletal host, and acts as though there's something of value here. It's dead. It's a whitewashed tomb. Looks beautiful. It's death, and that's what they want. Now, notice they do want to reduce the population, but they never volunteer to join in the
No,
reduction.
never.
They always give themselves special status of the elite. This is their religion. If you understand progressivism and leftism is a satanic religion, you might understand it better. There are going to be saints and pastors and prophets, the Klaus Schwabs and the Bill Gates, who are self-appointed. There's going to be a worship of gods, which is the creation. That's what climate change is. This is the oldest worship outside of the authentic worship of God Almighty, is worshiping, and he warned us about this. Worship me, creator, not what I created. Well, what is climate change? Oh my gosh, we're killing the atmosphere. We're killing some slug in
Yeah, but Brad, I would say I don't even want to give them that much credit. They're so cynical.
Mm.
Nobody for 1 minute should think that Al Gore or Klaus Schwab are worried about climate.
No, they're not. What I'm getting at is
They're obsessed with controlling our access to energy.
that's right. And they are with their bunkers and their
Jet
their
planes.
stockade of
They're
foods.
worried about our freedom of movement. God forbid a working class American. What I love about this country, and like I said, I was an atheist until my late 20s, but just what's always great about this country is, and I think it's in our declaration principle, that we're all sort of like we live in this, we have, I forget how you worded it, but if you're in the West, especially if you're in the United States of America, you see the human person as special. You know, Christ has won. Christ is king. And I'll give you just two great examples of how you know Christ is king. You look at the war in Gaza. You have a Jewish state fighting a Muslim Islamist extremist organization. Well, both sides in that conflict are holding themselves up as the victim. Both sides are appealing to the West and the United States as we are the weak, we are the marginalized, we are the victim. And both sides have a story to tell that's believable. But would they have been appealing to the Romans by saying, we're weak, we're the aggrieved party, they wronged us, help us? No, what they would have said is, we're strong, we should be your ally, we'll annihilate them. We should be your partner because we're a better ally because we will annihilate this weak adversary of ours. So Christ the King has won in the sense that you have a Jewish state and an Islamist organization both appealing to the gospel values of stand with the vulnerable, stand with the oppressed. So this, to me, is a sign that Christ has won. And that's why these demons like Klaus Schwab use victimism, because it sounds like the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
And there are glimmers of truth to it. Like you and I, of course, I don't want anyone, and by the way, I'm horrible at this. I do it all the time. I'm like, I throw grenades all over the world as I walk, but I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want my words or the way I look at somebody to make them feel insecure or hurt their feelings. I don't want, I would hate to do that, right? I care about young people with gender dysphoria. So the victimism can only exist in a society that knows the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's an attempt to pervert it, and it's an attempt to counteract it.
Yes.
So the way that we respond to victimism is authentic love, which comes with self-sacrifice and a cost. But you had said that these ideologies steal, they create nothing. That's what's great about them, that they're deprivations.
Hmm.
They're evil, which means it's the absence of reality in a
Yeah.
way. So regimes of evil always collapse. Nazism collapsed. Hitler's 1,000-year Reich didn't last 13 years. The Soviet Union lasted 70. What is now we're looking at 90 years. So we're approaching 90 years for 80 years for the CCP. But what we know is these regimes collapse. Now you look at our republic that has lasted, survived the Civil War, survived world wars, internal struggles around race. But we're the strongest, wealthiest, most powerful country in the world that changed Earth. Like all the inventions and everything that came out of here. Well, I think why? It's because it's grounded on we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. It's grounded on a Christian vision of the human person. What's
Yeah.
funny about that is I think the founding fathers were wrong. It isn't self-evident that we have equal rights. It was the gospel of Jesus Christ that shared that truth with the world.
That's right. That's right.
And so what the founding fathers should have said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, but only because we're in a Christian civilization.
Yeah, but I think Jason that they assumed that because it
Yeah.
was such a Christian saturated
Yeah.
culture, and people always want to say, they never want to give credit to Christianity for anything because they've created nothing, so they're jealous and covetous of what
Exactly.
Christ has done. But here's what's interesting: they always want to say, well, the founders weren't believers or they were deists and whatnot, and that's true. A few of them maybe weren't Trinitarians; they didn't believe in the Trinity. But they did believe that there was a holy God, that there was judgment on those who didn't serve him, that God is worth praying to. A deist doesn't pray to God because if you were a deist, you think he's already left the arena, and that they believe that God would hold their revolution up as a righteous war. And so they did assume Christianity was the fabric of the nation. Thus, they didn't have to elaborate on what they were referencing because it was just part of the DNA of how people saw the world. You read the Bible to
Well,
your kids.
but it is, I think it's one of those revealed religious truths that in light of revelation, it seems natural.
Yeah.
So I think to the founding fathers, I was an atheist and I was an Ayn Rand objectivist, and what I found attractive about Ayn Rand, the Russian Jewish atheist philosopher on the right, was her exaltation of human dignity, and I think what Ayn Rand, a Jew from Russia, didn't understand is that this vision of the human person that she held to was a Judeo-Christian understanding of the human person. I think she wouldn't have. I think she called it self-evident, axiomatic.
Well,
And
they're
that was,
always stealing from Christian perspectives because it worked. When somebody
but it
talks,
seems axiomatic. That's going to be my point, Brad.
Yeah.
Like to the founding fathers and to Ayn Rand, it seemed axiomatic. But what we need to do now as Christians, the first principle we need to advocate against the Great Reset is the inviolable dignity of the human person.
Yes.
What does that mean? I'm not taking your vaccine developed from human embryonic kidneys. Sorry, ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy your electric vehicle that by necessity has child slave labor at the birth of that vehicle with the cobalt harvesting, the quote unquote artesian cobalt harvesting that goes into the lithium electric vehicle batteries. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to resist and work for the toppling of the CCP because it had its boot on the body, on the throat of the body of Christ in China. So the first thing is that we give not 1 inch in advocating for human dignity. We even see this now in the Republicans kind of floundering around in the wake of Roe versus Wade, trying to find messaging on abortion that will work. The messaging on abortion that will work is to tell the truth about the child in the womb and get to it. And of course, after a major success like overturning Roe versus Wade, you're going to have to regroup and re-strategize and retool, and there'll be some political defeats. Any defeat is well worth the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So what we must continue to do is relentlessly advocate for the dignity of the child in the womb. The great way to crash any ideological enthusiasm or any totalitarian regime is the Christian vision of the human person.
Mm.
And wherever the human person is being abused, as Christians, we should be stand ready to defend them. And so, to your whole point, it's that principle in the Declaration of Independence that Abraham Lincoln called that declaration principle the work of art, and the Constitution is just the frame protecting that work of art.
Mm.
That same work of art will defeat the Great Reset, the inviolable dignity and beauty of the human person.
Well, you said earlier you were bringing it up, and we're getting close to the hour mark. We might go a little bit over if that's cool, but nevertheless, I don't want to keep you too long. But can you quickly sort of summarize? You said there were 5 pillars. Is that how you described it, as to what this sort of weaponized philosophy is when it comes to the Great Reset? So why don't you let us know what that is? Because again, I want people to be enticed to get your book and to understand what they're going to learn about, so they know what they're battling. So you mentioned victim is. I'm not used to this word.
Yeah, well, if you need to know why
victimizing.
to buy my book, not only to know the 5 pillars, I have 7 children, 5 of them all going to college in the next 4 years.
Mm.
So if you want to know why to buy my book, I have 5 kids in 4 years, one by one, dripping into college.
Okay.
So help.
Yes. All right. So victimizing is one.
Victimism, feigning
Victimism.
for the vulnerable for power. Gnosticism, which is breaking down the trust and transmission of information and knowledge. Gnosticism, anti-humanism, which we see the death cult, the culture of death, from abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, and the population control obsession of people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. Transhumanism, if anti-humanism is warring against human beings, transhumanism is obliterating the concept of the human person.
Mm.
And then the climate cult. And we, now with the WHO literally seeking to install like a red button in Geneva that they could push whenever they want. So chiefs of police from Seoul, Korea to Cleveland, Ohio, start rounding people up for daring to go outside without a mask or without an experimental vaccine.
How do we fight that? How do we fight that? How do we keep that from being that
Okay, I got
sovereign
the
rights?
5 principles. Christian personalism, the natural law, transcendent moral order. There's a law above the opinions of man, laws of man. Subsidiarity, the humane economy, and solidarity. But I want to go to subsidiarity. No institution should be more powerful than my city, town, family, friends, neighbors, and pastor. None in my life. My next door neighbor and my state representative and my county sheriff, like distant, unelected bureaucracies staffed by people from failed states, like the new head of this WHO. This guy is like from Ethiopia, from a criminal regime, and he wants the power to enslave mankind at a whim because of a virus or because of a climate. Come on, give me a break. Subsidiarity. The further an institution is away from you, the less power it should have.
Mm.
And we should never comply with distant, unelected bureaucracies.
But
And if
you're
it
saying
goes
that
past Washington, D.C., don't even talk to me. I
Yes.
don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care what The Hague says. I don't care what Geneva says. I don't care what the United Nations says. No.
But are you saying that the president can just unilaterally sign this over? Doesn't this have to go through?
It's I have an article coming out this week, Brad. I'll send it to you.
Okay, but
we have until May.
wouldn't this typically be something that would have to go through Congress and be debated and voted on as to whether we want to do this?
They do these administrative treaties and agreements.
How do we stop it? What can an American do?
So the state of Louisiana just had a bill that was just passed the Senate that would forbid any city, county, and state official to take any dictates from an unelected, un-American body.
So this would be a states' rights.
State by state. We need a national. We need something similar in Congress. This, to me, is an issue that we can all run on.
Yes.
I think it transcends left and right divide.
Yeah.
The idea that unelected thugs from corrupt regimes are going to tell me that my kid can't go to baseball practice. You've lost your mind.
Right.
You've lost your mind. Like men need to, the number one reason this is happening, Brad, is men need to man up. Like I went to jail. We need to be willing to go to jail. Like, do you think our grandparents' generation, you think your grandfather and my grandfather would have been told you couldn't tell them to wear a seatbelt?
Yeah.
You think you're going to tell them
Well, I mean, in my own little
they're
way,
not going to the VFW this week
I
because of
probably, I might have mentioned it last time we talked, but, and again, it's just a little tiny moment, but I walked through in 2020 the Chicago O'Hare without a mask on. And this was kind of new when everything was, it's the Black Plague. We're all going to just start dropping dead on the streets. And I just knew something wasn't right. And I thought I would inspire others to go, you know what? I don't want this. I don't think this is right. I want to risk my own safety. Let me make my own decisions. This is not constitutional. It certainly is stealing my liberty and freedoms as a free agent and a human. And so, and of course, nobody did. Instead, you're despised and hated. Everybody wants to talk about the emperor's new clothes and how brave and obvious the child was to say he's naked, and everybody goes, "Oh, we're in. You're right. Thanks for saying it." But when it really happens, Jason, when it's really at stake, when you really can be shamed, when you really can be despised, when you really can be hated, when you really can be cast aside and not able to engage in culture, then you see who you are and if you're willing to fight and die for liberty. So I did and I filmed myself so I'd never forget. This is what it looks like when the zombies do what they're told and didn't get their liberties stolen from them. They gave them away, which makes you a coward, which is the deepest level of hell you can end up in. Cowardice. And so I did my own little thing, as you did, where you said, I'm not going to do that. And it costs you something. But Christianity in America has been taught for I don't know how long that it costs you nothing. That Christianity is dead. And it should be, because it's dead Christianity. It's faithless Christianity. It has no substance because it isn't authentic. Christianity is dangerous and it comes with a cost. The freedom of salvation, of Christ giving and sacrificing himself so that I can be perfectly viewed through the prism of his blood, and God sees me as holy and sacred, and he lets me come into his sacred heavenly realm forever. That's free. That was given to me by his son, Jesus Christ. I can't earn it. I never can. He did all the work. But from the moment I accept and bow my knee to Christ and say, I accept you, whatever is asked of me, whatever sacrifice, whatever crucifixion, whatever death, whatever slavery that God asks of me, he is owed. That is a fruit that should be observed in my life to prove that I actually was sanctified and redeemed and I'm one of his. And I'm telling you, a lot of you churchgoers are going to be weeded out because you ain't one of us and you're going to hell. That's how big this is. That's how real this is. God even said there will be those who will say, we did a lot of things in your name. And he said, how dare you represent my name when you were not of my genetic connection? So this is how real this is. We have never been expected as Christians to sacrifice anything. Those days are over. So here's what I want.
Our generation. Yeah, Brad. And I would want to say this, like I think about this about myself sometimes. If I do something or say something or even think something, I'll stop and go, do you even believe in God? Like,
yeah, well, yes, but that's called work. That's called working it out with fear and trembling.
I'm like, I say to myself, like, how could you think that? Or how could you say that? Or how could you react that way? Do you even believe in God?
That's the beautiful thing about the Bible. People try to say it approved of slavery. No, it told us how to manage and navigate slavery since it existed. It also is what was the precursor to saying you don't get to steal human beings. That's in the 10 Commandments. You don't get to.
But my point in saying that, Brad, is to your point about those who, if you are not resisting COVID policy, for example, lockdown policy, if you are allowing your children to be abused or injected with an experimental vaccine, you need to ask yourself,
yes,
honestly, do I even believe in God?
That's it. That's exactly it.
I ask myself that a lot. And I wonder sometimes, like, am I a practical atheist? Is my brain crazy? Like, how does somebody say he believes in God, then this thought flitters through? Or
no.
But what I'm saying is, the reason I'm saying that is we all need to like assess and like, and do you love your children and grandchildren? You know, if I was an atheist, what would I do? Would I go out there and womanize and be a drug addict or blow my brains out like an existentialist philosopher? No, I probably would be a rational hedonist. I would probably take as much pleasure that caused me the least amount of hangovers. I would go along to get along. I would do what the state said and the bureaucrats said and the power brokers said. That's how I would behave. I would behave like a lot of Christians behave today. They're rational hedonists. They're not
Yeah.
out there womanizing and getting drunk every night, but that's probably not very pleasant after a
Yeah.
while, right? No, they just behave to me the way I would behave if I was like, yeah, I don't believe in God.
Mm.
The other way I would believe, if I had a little more energy than I do, I might be like Klaus Schwab. I might say there's no God, therefore I'm God.
Yeah.
And that's the point. These transhumanist advocates, they think they're going to live forever.
And they're
And
trying to create that.
they're trying to create it. This is real. And when they want to reduce the world population, what they're trying to do is reduce the number of competitors they have for resources and their future, which they don't think is, Bill Gates doesn't think he's dying in the next 2 decades. Like Bill Gates is obsessed with living forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is satanic.
It is satanic. Well, listen, for those who subscribe to the Mighty 10,000, these are 10,000 Christians that donate $3 a month to help this podcast grow and the things I'm doing and be a united body of Christ that are not within the church building, even though that's crucial and you should be supporting your church. I'm never against that. But the church is, in fact, the believers. So for those of us who have subscribed to that, I have a special bonus question that is only seen by those folks. And that's what I'm going to ask right now. So for those of you who have subscribed to Mighty 10,000, you'll hear this. But here's what I want you to do. And it's probably longer than it needs to be. So I'm going to let you do it. To summarize, for those who think, they can't take over the world, we'd see it coming, we'd stop it. So if you could quickly summarize, based on the 5 pillars that you've described, as to how they go about destroying freedoms and liberties and stealing our constitutional rights and our agency as humans, show how that was proven effective and feasible through the coronavirus. Can you show us how they did a trial run to show how easy it will be to control the world in a very micro level through corona? Hey guys, I'm interrupting my own interview. If you want the answer that you haven't heard yet, go to bradstine.com and join one of the 3 tiers. It is the militia of the mind, it is the warrior level, or it is the special forces. And then you'll get all kinds of special content and bonus answers to make you smarter than you could ever imagine. Go there now, jump on and join the Mighty 10,000. If they ever say, boy, you're being politically incorrect, always thank them for the compliment. What a great thing for somebody to tell you that you're not a Marxist and you're not a fool. Folks, this is Jason Jones, and people like that are fighting with us to defend the greatest nation the world has ever known. It's on the brink of being destroyed. Let's just see what God might do if we, as his people, humble ourselves and see if he will awaken a 3rd great awakening, because the believers, not the non-believers, the believers say, we aren't worthy of this, Father, but you have sacrificed your Son for us, and we will treasure that, and we will fight and believe that the supernatural can be brought into play and destroy the evil that's destroying this nation. I don't know what God has in store. We'll find out, but go down swinging. This is God's Comic Brad Stine. This is Jason Jones, and I'm doing what Brad Stine Has Issues always does. I'm just putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.